do you believe that in this meeting, Europe will directly sanction either Russian oil, Russian gas, or both?
I think this is very much what Biden comes to Europe hoping to be able to accomplish. And of course, a lot of the groundwork for this has been laid already. I think really what they're going to be looking for, especially in the meeting with the EU leaders, is to simply continue this very heavy cooperation on sanctions, which has been very effective so far. But it can go much further. I mean, oil and gas exports are one piece of this. That's maybe the most controversial part. But there are a lot of other things that they could do. Shipping, export restrictions, all sorts of things that allies have not yet done.
Well, on that, obviously, we saw sanctions on Russian oil to the U.S., although there's a number of tankers apparently still basically on their way to the U.S. filled with Russian crude because that 45-day window. Vladimir Putin also insisting he wants to be paid in Russian rubles. And with the depreciation of the ruble, Ian, isn't it possible that financially Vladimir Putin, right now anyway, is doing just fine?
He may be doing just fine right now, but it's very clear that as this goes on, the Russian economy is going to be coming under increasing pressure. I mean, this is already true. It's quite clear. And I would view this stunt really about being paid in rubles is really as an act of desperation, to be honest. This is not serious and is unlikely to happen. And even if countries were to start paying for some energy imports in rubles, this is a very short-term thing. It's not going to last very long. I mean, he's facing increasing pressure. How far it goes with this visit, we'll have to see.
We have seen some high-ranking leaders inside of Russia resign. We've seen some be sidelined, Ian. Most of the folks that we have talked to have suggested that the only way out of this, because it's not possible for Vladimir Putin, who clearly is a war criminal and has been announced as such by the United States and others, to simply go back to ruling even if he ends the war tomorrow. Is the only way out of this war for somebody or a group of people, the military, oligarchs, or somebody else, to step up and say, we are now in charge of Russia. Vladimir Putin is no longer in charge. The military reports to us, and please come home. In other words, is the only way out kind of a coup, an internal coup by Russia? And if so, do you see anybody that could pull that off right now?
Well, I think one thing that Western allies clearly are hoping for is regime change in Moscow. I mean, that is in some ways the best way out of this, not only the crisis in Ukraine itself, the war at the moment, but also the longer-term relationship with Russia. I mean, one has to consider, how would it be possible to have a normal economic and political relationship with a leadership that's behaved in this extraordinarily ruthless way? So, even when it comes to the sanctions debate about how do you end sanctions, regime change is in a way the easiest way to get there. One way would indeed be a military coup or something else like that in Moscow, or a political coup. In any case, this is for Putin clearly about regime survival. If he can't produce something that he can claim as a victory out of this, the durability of his regime is presumably limited.
Well, Ian, what do you think his goal is? I mean, is the goal to conquer Ukraine? That we have not seen a nation conquer another nation of this size since 1939. I mean, what exactly is the goal here? Now it seems like he just wants to punish and destroy because he's angry it didn't go the way that he wanted to. And if that's the case, even if he said tomorrow, okay, I've taught them a lesson, Russian troops come home, I'm still in power, how does the world react to that? Does the world just go about doing business with Russian oil, gas, and red wheat like it had before?
Brian, I'm not sure Putin really knows what the end goal is here. It's clearly evolved. The original idea presumably was to have some sort of a lightning invasion, which would in fact just simply change the government in Ukraine into something more congenial, and he would declare victory. And there would be pieces like Crimea and Donbass that Russia would retain. He may come back to at least the territorial part of that as something that he would accept as, in some sense, a victory. But at this point, having gotten into this very heavy invasion with very little success, The stakes are extremely high for him. And clearly one of his objectives here has to simply be to stay in power. But if he does stay in power, he's going to be facing a very, very different West than he was facing even a few weeks ago. I do not see any way that NATO, the European Union, others are really going to change their posture unless he goes.
Without direct involvement. And Ian, the point I made with Kayla Tausche earlier in the program, and I want to make this crystal clear to our audience, is that let's not confuse NATO nations with NATO itself. As of now, there have been NATO nations like the U.S. that have put economic sanctions and help with military aid. But NATO as an organization has done basically nothing.
Yeah. NATO has actually done a great deal, but it's done it for NATO allies within the alliance to reinforce its own defense capacity to defend countries that are inside NATO. In terms of helping Ukraine, you're absolutely right. Most of the assistance has gone through individual NATO member states. I think that could be one of the key deliverables from the president's visit, to try to get NATO itself more engaged, probably within limits, but more engaged in the security of Ukraine per se.